I'm taking a detour to Galway, the fastest growing city in Ireland, and traffic on the roads reflects that growth. This city is at the centre of the Western Rail corridor, which will reconnect it to Limerick and Sligo. I'm meeting up with Frank Dawson, who is a key player and has long understood the importance of getting trains back on the Western Rail corridor.
So it's going to be a combined intercity, commuter and freight line. And it will contribute greatly, I hope, to the efforts being made to create that legitimate counterbalance to Dublin-Belfast.
Frank, with the line opening between Ennis and Athenry, what's that got to offer?
It's going to offer a solution to congestion. Here in this city, we have approximately 60,000 car movements a day. Importantly, they are all, as they would readily tell you, suffering from the effects of congestion and delay, apart from being a health impactor and being a polluter of our atmosphere in having such volumes of cars in congestion. So I see Athenry and the reinstatement of the railway line north of Athenry to the hub town of Tuam and on to County Mayo and on eventually into Sligo as an essential in regard to Western development.
How many people are you talking about?
Overall, we project in or around 900,000 to 1 million passenger journeys on the Mayo to Limerick railway once it's fully operational. In other words, this railway will be as competitive and compatible as any other railway in this country, because after all, it's serving a viable community.
Is freight transport by rail important?
Well, I think it is a reasonable thing to project for the Western Rail corridor. If we currently have 16,000 truckloads on the railways, it's not unreasonable to project 20 to 25,000 truck loads being removed off the N17, N18 and N25, three very busy roads currently. And that's a fair volume of traffic to have already removed in advance. And it is in that context that we see this very modest investment, which represents 0.5 of the total investment within Transport 21, quite modest in national terms, and we are not always acknowledged as having already proven the freight case. And we don't like to think that we're being greedy or being unreasonable in suggesting that we need all forms of access and travel available to us.
I've bumped into an old friend, Ronnie Conlon, from Tuam, north of Galway, a station due to have its service restored in 2011. He's delighted with the accessibility of the new trains. Ronnie, how does it feel to see the trains coming back?
Well, I find it hard to put it into words. My grandfather worked on the trains in Tuam in County Galway for 44 years as a superintendent's clerk. My father worked on the railway a good few years as well, and the train was nearly in our blood, you know.
Did you use the train much?
I would, when I was a young lad. I mean, I didn't become disabled until I was nearly 21, but I remember going to Knock in a carriage with four nuns with those big hoops on their heads, you know.
Big butterfly.
Exactly, they were French order, I think. And it was nothing but the rosary all the way from Tuam to Claremorris and on to Knock, you know.
You didn't have a special seat then, did you?
No, I mean, I've travelled on trains from 1966 in a wheelchair until 1975. I was often in the guard's van, behind bars, like a criminal, looking out at the public and they're looking in at me.
Because you weren't in a normal seat, was that it?
I'd have to be lifted bodily out of the wheelchair into the seat, and maybe the wheelchair would come in after me then. You often stayed between the different carriages, you know, in the corridor,
no
more or less.
No facilities at all?
Very poor facilities. You couldn't get into the toilet.
Are all the stations accessible?
I hope so. I think Tuam will be just as good as Galway in terms of the trains that go there. I mean, it's great development for the west of Ireland. We feel, if this is put in place, that we're actually connected to the rest of the country.
I'm back on the Western Rail corridor, heading towards Tuam. If you consider that a truck consumes 5 times the fuel and generates 5 times the CO2 emissions as rail carrying freight, it makes a strong case for the economic and environmental benefits of good working railways. This densely populated rural community have made great strides to maintain and restore this attractive station at Ballyglunan. As many people commute to Galway, they need trains to stop here. I'm navigating the evening traffic to Tuam's town centre to meet up with Sarah Rorty from the local Chamber of Commerce.
It's Friday afternoon, there's a huge amount of traffic on the streets. It's quite difficult to have a conversation, in fact, with the noise. Never mind the CO2 emissions. But in addition to that, if we go out to the N17 currently, there's a gridlock there at the moment. It could be another hour before people actually get home this evening.
So how will the rail affect this area?
It'll affect it quite significantly, Duncan. If we look at Census 2006, of the people who travel to work, 40% of people in Tuam travel over 25 kilometres to work. Now, as it stands at the moment, only 3% of those use public transport because the options simply aren't there. So we've got over 30,000 cars travelling on a daily basis between Tuam and Galway. Now, as a commuter myself, I experience that, every day. And it's not so much the length of the journey, it's just the not knowing when you're actually going to arrive. Are you going to be there? Is it going to be half an hour? Is it going to be an hour? Or indeed, as it was a few weeks ago, is it going to be 8 o'clock before you get home?
Just off the N17 at Tuam railway station, I'm meeting up with Father Micheál McGrail, the patron of West on Track, a community-based campaign aimed at reopening the Western Rail corridor. Father Micheál's struggle started a few decades earlier when the railway first closed down.
Well, this particular project started early in 1979. It was just 4 years after they closed the railway from Collooney to Claremorris. I walked the line itself and I measured the traffic on the roads and made a case for it that this was to be a very important infrastructure and should be restored.
Did you actually stop the track being taken up?
Well, we stopped it, of course we did. But we didn't have to do any protesting, but we accepted responsibility for the cost of maintaining it, insurance and so on. Now, if we were to buy that thoroughfare today, it would nearly be $750 million to go from Sligo down to Limerick. It's national property. It's the thoroughfare, as you can see it there, and right up the whole way.
If the rail didn't go all the way up to Sligo eventually, how important is it that this happens?
You see, at the moment, this railway links the main line to Sligo, the main line to Westport and Ballina, the main line to Galway, the main line to Limerick, the main line to Cork and Tralee, the main line to Waterford, and the main line to Rosslare. And when this cross-radial is in place, you can have a railway holiday in this country. And I'm hoping in the distant future that the links between Derry and Collooney will be restored, because they were knocked out for political reasons to isolate and insulate the north.